It's time for Mac Break Weekly. Rene Ritchie, Andy Anako, and I, we're going to talk about Apple Event, the series, Season 2, the 2021 edition. Apple has probably at least half a dozen events scheduled. Rene, Andy, and I will go through our predictions for what we're going to see from Apple in 2021. There's a new Outlook client coming to Macintosh. This time it's just the same as on Windows. Apple kills 39 games in the Chinese App Store and loses their copyright battle against Corellium. It's all coming up next on Mac Break Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Mac Break Weekly, episode 747, recorded Tuesday, January 5th, 2021. I'm not against caffeine, I just like amphetamine better. Mac Break Weekly is brought to you by Hover. Whether you're a developer, photographer, or small business, Hover has something for you to expand your projects and get the visibility you want. Go to hover.com/twit to get 10% off your first purchase of any domain extension for the entire first year. It's time for Mac Break Weekly, the show we cover the latest Apple news, episode 747. So this is going to be a jumbo show. Andy Anako is here from WGBH in Boston. Hey, Andy.
Hey, I'm. Thank you for upgrading the extra leg room in this seat. This room is really awesome.
We decided to put you in business. By the way, Happy New Year. First time I've seen you in 2021.
Exactly. Happy New Year to everybody. It's just it's okay for people to not make fun of other people for thinking, oh, 2021, thank God 2020 is over. It's okay for people to just let people be happy and let people be optimistic. I've never been so glad that a routine numerical increment, a variable plus has made me so happy. I think I'm very pleased about this. I think
we'll
we all
see.
should be.
I mean, we'll see. It remains to be seen.
Again,
but I choose to be
on Tuesday. This could be.
I choose to be optimistic.
It's a decision. You're right. It is a decision to be optimistic.
It remains to be
It's a
seen. Also with us, Rene Ritchie from youtube.com/Rene Ritchie. Hello, Rene.
Hello, Leo. I'm going to be the pessimist here because it's December 36th and we're going back into lockdown. So Merry 2020, the Snyder Cut to all of you.
It is hard to be too optimistic during the coldest, for us in the Northern Hemisphere, the coldest time of the year. For you in Australia, our Australian listeners, I'm very jealous, although it's probably burning hot. But even in California, when it's in the 30s, it's hard to be, I don't know, optimistic, I guess. January and February are yuck months. I don't like them.
Yeah, see, in New England here, December is the Courier and Ives sort of, oh, look, it's Christmas in New England, gentle snowfall and reindeer and stuff like that. January and February is no, we're going to have nothing but brown and gray slush frozen to a depth of 8 inches that you can't walk on. It's going to be, no matter how you weather strip your windows, the wind is going to find a way to come in. And so this is when even people like me stop saying this isn't cold, this is crisp. This is the time when we start saying
it's
brass monkeys, man, brass monkeys.
It's crisp. Yeah, brass monkeys. So let's see what's going on with Apple. You did a video, Rene. I enjoyed it. I saw it on iMore. With your predictions for 2021, and there does seem to be some consensus that Apple's going to not waste much time with new announcements this year. What do you think is going to happen?
I think we're going to start off at the very least with season 2 of the Apple Event Show, whether that's 2 episodes, one in March, one in April, and then WWDC will be episode 3 in the summer, and then episode 4, 5, and 6 maybe in September, October, November, depending on how the world goes, of course. But I think Apple's got that whole production thing into a well-oiled machine, and they're just going to keep feeding us those one or two product maybe episodes every month for quite a while.
That's actually a great idea. And why wait till March? Let's start now. You got Apple tags. Let's get them going. There is now.
You can't start now. Nobody shops in January, Leo. We know that. We have to wait until people have their money back.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
March, I think. Late February, early March.
Gosh, we could use something in this chilly time. to warm the cockles of our hearts, whatever a cockle is.
Those AirTags are concerning me because at least the images that John Prosser leaked have so much text on them. And like, I don't want an Apple that puts the word Bluetooth LE engraved in metal on any product visibly that I buy from them.
Is it possible that that's, I don't know, just a pre-production model so that you're right. Apple would never do that unless they had to, unless the FCC made them.
Yeah, I hope it is. I understand, like on the AirPods, on the case, it says designed in California, manufactured in China. And even that is too much for me. There's not even an Apple logo on it, but they have that on it. So I'm guessing there is some sort of requirements they have to fulfill.
Yeah, in fact, they got a waiver, I think, from the FTC on the iPhone not to have to put all that junk on the back of the iPhone. I seem to remember that.
Yeah, I mean, the tile tracker looks very, very streamlined and slick.
Yeah.
So it's curious to see. It's the thing is that the Apple will make, even if it's just a simple tag, a simple tracker, they're going to by default design it so that you kind of want to put it on your keychain so that when you just casually drop it on the table, it's the device that lands on top so people can see this cool stylish fob you have on it. And I'm not even kidding about it. So I'm sure that if there's anything that is getting away from just logo, shape, and a shadow line edge as the only piece of detail, there has to be an actual law that they have to comply with to make that happen. So that's why I don't. When I saw that image, I didn't think that was going to be the final thing. It doesn't look like an Apple thing.
I love how John Prosser puts his name all watermark all over it.
Well, I mean, if you're gonna be threatened, if you're gonna risk like being broken into by Apple security, you may as well get credit for the thing that you weren't supposed to have information about.
So we're seeing
it also started because people would take the image and repost it as if it was their own.
Right, exactly.
So
I know why he does it. I feel bad that he has to. So on the one side, it's just plain white. Plastic, probably. It looks about the size of a
nature
tile.
And Jobs intended.
Yeah, so it's a plastic circle. On the other side, though, this is interesting, and this is where you say, you see the printing designed by Apple, or, assembled in China. That looks like a metal, kind of a concave metal, like a little mini parabolic antenna or something. I presume that's the antenna.
And even that is fine, but it's just when it gets into and even ultra-wideband sounds like a cool sort of a tech thing that Apple might, sort of like they put sapphire crystal on the back of the Apple Watch. But once you get into Bluetooth LE, I don't want to say Bluetooth LE is like low rent at this point, but it doesn't seem very auspicious.
We should mention, Prosser's pretty accurate, yeah?
Yeah.
We should mention this is a render that he made from a video he saw. So it's a little bit of a
posted the video now as well.
Oh, has he posted the video? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, the video was from software, though. It looks like the setup screen animation where the thing spins around.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So does he say the provenance of that? Did it come from a beta build or?
I think he said it was from some software engineer, but it's not out yet, so it's got to be from a beta build or an internal test build.
Right.
Yeah, and let's also remember that however they designed this, there has to be a way to replace a battery in it. It's Bluetooth LE, but Apple is not the company that's going to say, oh, when a battery runs out, just simply take it to the Apple Store. We'll swap you out a new one.
That was one problem with the tile, is the battery would run out. You have to throw the tile out. Yeah. Which I never felt good about.
And then they email you every minute to tell you that the battery's done.
Right. We had a sponsor called Tracker that was a competitor, No E. And they had a replaceable battery, but as a result, the battery died faster. It was one of those things where you ended up replacing the battery more, every few months. So do you think this might be rechargeable, wirelessly rechargeable? How about that?
That would make it really more complicated. Yeah. I would be more inclined to think that given the amount of devices that I have that run off of a 2032 and run on Bluetooth LE for like a year or more, I don't know why Apple would want to increase the expense of manufacture, also to make it more complicated, because that antenna has to be isolated. It has to basically work as a recharging device. That's not my first indication.
Yeah. You say, Rene,
that would either need a plug. If there's no plug, it would need coils to be inductively charged, and then it's even more complicated.
That's not great. But probably would interfere with the UWB and the BLE.
Yeah.
It is another opportunity to make people angry for using Lightning instead of USB-C. So there is that.
One more chance. Rene, you say that they've had these for a year. We certainly have been hearing rumors for a year, and they've been waiting for the market to be right. What do you think that means?
The rumors first came out when Apple announced their new Find My network way back at WWDC 2019. And then they put the U1 chip in the iPhone 11 and didn't say anything about it. And then behind the scenes, they were saying, oh, yeah, it'll help you with directional AirDrop, which is just like, OK, that's fine. But originally, there was rumors that they were going to make the Find My network not open source, but they were going to license it, which they did. You can now, competitors can now make devices using the Find My network. And that people were thinking maybe they want to avoid scrutiny from Tile because they already are taking it so much from Epic and other companies. But now it just sounds like they made a product for all of us to go outside and lose our stuff, and nobody's going outside. And the only place we're losing our stuff is in our house. And it's just not. They don't think they'll sell.
You're
that
right.
many.
The time is not right for that, right? I also think
that Magsafe Duo. They made a Magsafe Duo, which they were going to pitch. My understanding is they were going to pitch this as the ultimate premium, all-in Apple ecosystem travel accessory. You have a ton of money, you have an Apple Watch, an iPhone, you want something that folds up, goes in your bag, goes in your pocket. You can charge your stuff on overnight trips. And then they had to announce it in a world where nobody's traveling, and everyone just looks at it and goes, "It costs a fortune. Why would I ever buy this?"
Yeah.
You don't think they do an AirPod-style charging case for it?
They would still need the inductive stuff inside because the AirPods are still charging.
That's right.
The magnetic
and then get it pretty
connections in the
small. I
case.
mean, it works in the AirPods.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's an Apple product,
that.
yes. It's an Apple product, yes, but it's still it's a Bluetooth tracker, and it has to. They don't have a lot of flexibility.
No,
on
it has
price
to go in
here,
your
so
keys.
They have to make it for a price.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, that's why I was very, very surprised they didn't find some way to release it before Christmas, because an Apple designed, Apple logoed, official Apple comes in a nice Apple box product that could conceivably be bought for less than $50.
Yeah.
That's gonna sell
Stocking stuffer.
gangbusters.
Yep.
Right, exactly. Whether you
And
need
the
it or not.
accessories.
Yeah.
Because the keychain and the wallet and everything are sold separately.
Right. Well, it's sold separately. There's also from Ming-Chi Kuo, and he's been saying this for a while, pretty strong rumor, he says, from the supply chain, that the Apple, at least the first generation Apple AR glasses will be coming out this year. You agree, Rene?
I think at most, I think a lot of that depends. I think that's something that Apple would want to show off in person. They would want to have an event where they could bring people in and check them out.
So they're going to wait on
if the
that.
world is better by September.
Yeah.
And they did do the Apple TV when it was called iTV. They announced that in September. And then, well, actually earlier this, I think September. And then the next year is when they put it out.
Right.
The Apple Watch in 2014, they announced in September and then officially released it in March. So they will do advanced previews when it behooves them. But I don't know what the market is going to look like. I think it'd be a great product for 2020, 2021, just to be able to put those glasses on and shut out the world for a while. But whether they think they can sell enough of them, I think is the question.
Speaking of Apple TV, I finally broke down. I bought my mom one because I wanted her to use Fitness Plus because she doesn't, she's 88. Happy birthday, Mom. She celebrated a couple of days ago, 88. And she used to have a trainer come over a couple of times a week, but she, with COVID, didn't feel safe doing that. But she said, well, I'll watch YouTube videos. I said, Mom, let me get you set up with Fitness Plus, because she has an new Apple Watch, an iPhone 12. And so I thought, well, I'll get the cheapest Apple TV, because that'll be enough for her. It's 1080p. She doesn't need 4K, even though she has a 4K TV. And then when time comes, I can get her a newer one if it has more features. She loves it, by the way. She says, I get up every morning. I can't wait to do my Fitness Plus, because I guess I said, Mom, you're not doing the dance exercises, are you? Apparently there are some, I don't know if it's yoga or what, where you could sit in a chair and do them. So, so she's doing like the chair exercises, which is for me a huge relief. I got her the Apple Watch for fall detection. I really wanted her to kind of keep moving. And it's great. She loves it. So I'm super happy with that. And that's good enough. That Apple TV is more than good enough for that. But I don't know. It feels like it's been, 2 years since the app? More. Three since the Apple TV update. Feels like it's time. They could put the new A14 in there. Make it better for gaming.
It's expensive again. I mean, that's the whole thing they're fighting with is they could put an A1210, an A12. Apple has me saying X like 10 all the time now. I hate it. They could put an A12X in there, and then it would do better. Like right now, the limit is HD compositing and higher end Apple Arcade games, but an A12X would fit that. The rumor is that they might go to an A14X and then get into gaming with a game controller, maybe even get some studios the way that other companies have.
That would be interesting.
But that's going to be an expensive box because that's an expensive chip.
Well, it'll still be cheaper than a PS5 or an Xbox Series X, right?
But the expectations won't be less, like, because people are like, nobody's going to spend, over $100, $200 on a set-top box when Roku is so cheap, or they'll expect something more like a console. And then, as good as the A14X is, it's not the same class of SoC as what AMD is doing in an Xbox or a PS4. It's just, especially in terms of graphics.
Yeah, especially when you compare it to the cheapest Apple TV you can buy right now is $179, and it's about at the same rate as a $50 Google Chromecast with Google TV dongle. If you want to spend the equivalent amount of money, you can get an NVIDIA box that is kind of more like a console, so much so that it can act as an entire self-contained media server if you want to. So it's hard to justify $179 for this box. Unless they have a really good plan for additional content that is going to put a lot more horsepower on the box instead of on the servers. When you think about how many services there are from Microsoft and Google that are going to be streaming games and put all that processing power on the server and just simply use it as a streaming device. And so congratulations, now you can get Cyberpunk on a $40, $50 dongle instead of a $500 box. What is Apple giving us in return? Right. So it's also just as you guys said, it's an old box at this point. You'd like to think that if they were to redesign it, it wouldn't be so much in the names of, oh well, now we're going to put in a hollow chip reader. Now we're going to have a 3D projector in it. More like, oh well, now we have a better idea of what people are using streaming boxes for in 2021. We're going to make custom silicon that works. So it's going to be the best client ever for Google Stadia, or it's going to be the best client ever for Microsoft streaming game services, because they've had a long time to do like gaming on the Apple TV, and it's still just sort of oh yeah, that's right. Well, if you read all the way down to the bottom of the product listing, it will say, oh yes, and by the way, you can run games on it as well. So they haven't really pursued that as well as they should have.
So Apple did this once before, way back when they had the Pippin. Remember that? It was a game. Did they ever release it? I don't think so.
Yep. Nope. It was released.
They blew this. Yeah. They blew this one twice. I mean, when the Apple TV was first coming out, the latest one, the future of TV as apps, they had a bunch of iOS game studios ready to put like the best and their brightest on the console because they had so much faith based on the iPhone's performance. And then Apple made those really wrong-headed, really dumb rules about having to use a Siri controller and having to use on-demand resources. And the studio's like, okay, we'll wait. And then it turned out that that became a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it never matured into a proper gaming market. And now, when they could have spent all of 2020 saying, look how amazing Stadia and Xbox, I forget what Xbox calls it now, it used to be Game Pass or whatever.
xCloud.
It was xCloud. They keep changing their branding.
I think it's still xCloud for the stream.
The Amazon one, and like everyone's announcing these, and they could have spent a year saying, you can run these services the best. They run the best on Apple hardware. Apple TV is the best experience for these things. And instead they're like, no, for some reason we're going to say these are actual apps, and you got to list them all in the App Store, and you can't run them. Oh, you want to do web clients now? Good luck with that.
That sounds to me like they have ambitions. They don't want to do Stadia or xCloud. They want to do Apple gaming.
But they do Netflix, and they have a TV Plus. Like that,
but remember,
you can't have one streaming service.
Remember what's going on. Well, they have Apple TV Plus. Remember what's going on now is Apple really wants to make Apple services more and more exciting. I think, right now there's a problem because you can't buy a PS5 or a Series X because they can't make them. In fact, Microsoft's pleading to AMD. We had the Microsoft Chief Marketing Officer on Windows Weekly a couple of weeks ago. And I asked him, why don't you do what Apple does, where you can order it and you say, well, it'll ship in January or March or whatever. At least people would know they were getting it. He says, we can't do that because our supply chain is so wonky. We can't predict. He says, Apple, you got to understand, Apple's amazing at this. They've got it down. They've been doing this for years. We cannot guarantee delivery in March or April, so we don't want to say that. AMC
and NVIDIA can't make boards. Like they've put boards on the market that they can't make.
Right. Yeah. So this is actually the norm, and we're just so used to Apple doing it so well They eliminated lines, basically. So
But going back
I
to what
think
you were
it's an
saying, Leo,
interesting idea that Apple might say, here's an opportunity. I mean, it's only for the next few months, but here's an opportunity. Why don't we make it essentially, don't call it a console, but make the Apple TV a game console, get some AAA titles on there. You could sell it for $250 easily.
But I think only if it has the streaming services. Like the same way I wouldn't buy an Apple TV without Disney Plus and Netflix.
Well, it would be an Apple TV,
CBS All
but it would
Access.
be in addition. If you buy a PlayStation 5, you've got streaming services on it. You can watch.
But what I mean,
Netflix on
Apple
it.
currently doesn't allow them, and I think that'll make it a useless box. Like they have to allow those services in order for it to be a useful box.
You mean for
right
gaming?
Now they show no.
You mean for gaming?
Yeah,
No, I think
it's a weird block in their mind.
You don't have to do that if you get a few good AAA titles. You don't need a lot. Traditionally the Xbox does not launch with great exclusives. Sony does. It hurts them, but Sony does better as a result. But I think
wouldn't it be an insta buy for you if it had Game Pass and it had PlayStation games and it had Stadia, all those things?
But I feel like Apple's the kind of company that doesn't do it that way. They want you to subscribe to Arcade Plus.
They do it for they don't make Netflix put all their titles in iTunes. I mean, that's the thing that kills me is they are essentially indistinguishable from streaming video services. They just have more complicated controllers.
Well, that's
the only thing.
That's my evidence that Apple has ambitions in this direction.
Well, yeah, but it also could be just simple dogma. There are very few parts of Apple that really feel dysfunctional, and when it comes to policy regarding the Apple Store, the App Store seems to be dysfunctional, maybe with a lowercase d rather than an uppercase d. So many times we see decisions that have reversed based on it didn't go. A decision was not important enough to go up the food chain for approval, or it keeps butting heads with a rule that was set 4 or 5 years ago, where a certain app category really didn't exist, and rather than realize that this rule is archaic, they'll simply shut out an entire category. When you see the ban on games and the rather silly, you have to submit each game individually that's going to be available through Stadia before we will allow we'll allow your streaming app to go in. That feels like a dogmatic choice as opposed to either strategic choice or engineering choice. And that's, given the history of Apple with the App Store, I would not doubt that this is just stupid bureaucracy that is interfering with the Apple TV becoming a very useful $179 box as opposed to a very overpriced $179 box.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see. I'm going to hold out.
But but everybody here, you're absolutely right. I mean, Apple has such a great opportunity here to sense the temperature of the room, that everybody wants the hottest new games on the hottest new consoles, but they cannot buy. Right. And it's becoming almost like a topic for late night comedians to joke about the inobtainium of a brand new present generation console. And if you want to run AAA games, there's going to be a point in which people are going to be sick and tired of the game. Of the game of acquiring the console and simply say, well, you know what? Out of desperation, I bought it on Stadia or I bought it on a
that's the hope
service.
That's
and
Google.
I was getting 120 frames per second. I'm getting 4K. I'm getting HDR, and I just over time I had the money set aside to buy a console in February or March or April when they become available. But then I realized I could spend all that money on actual games instead.
Yeah.
So this is an opportunity that Apple's sort of sitting on.
Apple had the opportunity. They should have bought Bethesda. Microsoft ended up buying Bethesda, but had Apple, for instance, bought Bethesda and sitting on Doom and and they could have, Skyrim and the whole. They could have.
Bungie.
Yeah, there were some opportunities there, and I think Apple. It would be a really interesting play for Apple. Are they? So that's the thing, is how all in on the ecosystem are they? I think that's part of the dogma too, Andy, is.
So they don't see that hardcore gaming is a profitable, but not profitable, but there's a lot of things where they'll say, yes, we could make some money on it, but is it a business we really want to be in? And they see casual gaming as being far lower effort and far higher return than hardcore gaming. And that's why I mentioned just the services, because right now people are playing Cyberpunk on Stadia.
I am.
Not only can you not get the consoles, you can't get Ampere or Big Navi cards, period.
No, it's not as beautiful probably as it would be on a PC with the right hardware.
It's the PC
but it's
version.
Playable. Yeah. It's playable. Its frame rate's okay. You can play the game at least, and you can play it on a Chromecast Ultra. So
and you can't on the older generation of consoles, which they were ironically built for.
They had to give people's money back. I could play it on my Samsung Galaxy Fold. It's actually not a bad experience. I got a little game controller that attaches onto the
better than a
USB-C
PS4.
port. It's not a bad experience. I just feel like I don't know. There's an opportunity, and Apple has been expanding well beyond what we normally think of Apple because of this desire to make more revenue per customer and this growth in services. I think there's an opportunity.
And they make content now.
Yeah.
Remember Alex was talking for years about Apple making content? They're finally doing it.
They're finally doing it. I wonder what their podcast ambitions are now that Amazon bought Wondery, Spotify's bought a number of podcast companies. We've always thought that Apple was interested in making content, but they haven't yet. And they've hired so many people we know.
And Steven Wilson has left.
Yeah.
So
I wonder. Hey, speaking of the Galaxy Fold, there is a rumor that Apple is at least looking at folding phones. Is that complete bazooties? Is that nutty?
I don't. Yeah.
I wouldn't.
I just don't.
Don't do
I
it.
don't see it. Yeah. It's Samsung is just right now sort of at the point where they're shipping devices that the people who would buy such a thing are happy with the devices that they're getting.
Yes.
They're not close yet to the point where people who are just looking for a phone would be willing to spend a couple $100 extra or a few $100 extra for this feature. It really is all about folding glass as opposed to folding plastic. That really isn't there yet. The question is Apple willing to sell a $1,600 phone, or is Apple willing to blur the lines between the iPad line and the iPhone line? I would like nothing else than to see them start to make a folding phone. I think they could really do it right, but I don't think that they're never in the business of, well, we want to be the first with a demonstrable functional product. They want to be the first with a functional and commercial product, and I don't think foldable phones are there yet.
I agree. I think Samsung's perfect for a foldable. I think Apple they got the iPhone, the iPad, and the Mac. They're good.
Well, it's not that they're not working on it. I mean, they were working on foldable prototypes back with the iPhone 4.
They work on everything. Yeah.
But totally. Except they believe that my understanding is they believe the technology is currently like it was in kindergarten. Now with the Fold 2, it's like in grade school, and they tend not to ship products until they see what Samsung is doing. They see what Motorola is doing. They spend 3-4 years on the market, and then they put out their version of it. And there's problems that they want to solve that aren't solved yet. But I do think, especially the way they've architected iOS most recently, since size classes and auto layout and things like that, it would make a really good experience going from an outside display to an inside display, a half display to a full display. And because their tablet ecosystem is so rich, just the idea, except for Instagram, because they'll make an iPad app when hell freezes over. Instead of that, but like Twitter on the closed thing versus Twitter on the open, all those apps will just work fantastically. So I'd love to see it, but I, like you said, I don't think they'll ship it until all of those issues are well and mature.
Yeah. Let's take a break, and then we'll talk about what everybody really wants to know, which is, tell me about the new Macs. We are still in season 2, episodes 1 and 2 of the ongoing Apple event show, but season 2 is coming, and you think that's when we're going to start to see new Macs, Rene?
I think so. I think if they're not new designs, I think if Apple just has if they do what they did last year and just put an M chip into the existing MacBook Pros,
they could do that.
The higher end 13
and
the 16, they could just do that as news drops because there's no announcement there.
Right.
But if they do a redesign, they're going to want to give that a video to show it off and to increase the hype. And then I think we see that at Dub or a little later.
Yeah, boy, I tell you, at this point, I don't use any other computers. Notice I brought my M1 in because I don't want to use that Surface Studio. My iMac Pro at home, I actually turned it off so it wouldn't use any power because it's just painful. I think it's just remarkable what Apple's done, and I cannot wait to see.
The most interesting thing is watching the PC master race just come to terms with the fact that they don't actually like silicon. They like hobbyist silicon that they understand and can futz with.
Yeah.
And when anything else interesting comes on the market, they're just so disdainful of it.
Yeah. I'm really intrigued by what Apple's got.
We'll talk more, but I'm totally with you.
Yeah. Hang on. Here we go. We're going to have more with our great friends, Andy Anako, Rene Ritchie. A little program note. Next week, David Pogue joins us, the original Macster.
Nice.
Remember Macworld Expos? David would do his show singing his Broadway tunes rewritten to include. Those were so much fun. David, of course, wrote The Missing Manuals. He's now moved on to a new series of books, and he's just written a book which I pre-ordered, should come out pretty soon, about the end of the world, a.k.a. climate change. Our show today brought to you by Hover. The new year is here. New year, new domain, right? Right? Let Hover help you establish your brand, create a new domain, whether you're a blogger, an artist, a photographer, creating a portfolio. Maybe you're building an online store for your handmade mask creations. Maybe you just want to have a better link to your LinkedIn page. Hover can get you started with the best domain names and email addresses just for you. I have hundreds of Hover domain names. Pretty much everything we do at Twit is registered at hover.com. The domain name, I feel like this is an advanced tip, but anybody who listens to any of our shows should be at least getting a domain name, even if you didn't want to do a website, for your email. For your email. If you're a plumber and you have your customers emailing AOL.com, that's not a good look. That's not a good look. You want to look professional, have your company name.com. You could set up a website later, but just getting the email started is a great way to do it. You can add, it's so easy to set up. You can add as many email boxes to your domain as you need. When your domain renews, the mailboxes renew too. Very good prices. I read an article the other day that said nobody should be using free email anymore because, nothing's free. And free email, they're mining your data. They're putting ads in there. Especially if you're a business, you get not just an email address, but get Hover email. Then you control it. You own it. And, of course, you can use the email app you're already comfortable with. They have webmail for you, too. So if you like webmail, you can continue to do that. And the thing I love about Hover is they're not here to upsell you on stuff you don't need. In fact, it's the best domain buying experience ever. That's why we all use it here when we have this, brainstorms, Micah Sargent. I got to get that URL and register it right away. And Hover makes that very easy because there's not, and maybe you'd like this, maybe you'd like that. They've got great domain and email management tools, pro-level tools. They're intuitive. They're easy to use. I've spent a lot of time in the DNS settings there. I use them all the time. It's really great. They give you Whois privacy by default. You don't even have to pay for it. It's included with your purchase because, and I think people know this, but if you don't, you should. When you register a domain name, you have to register with a name, address, and phone number for the administrative contact, the technical contact. If you're using your name, your address, and your phone number, that's public information. Anybody can find it. Whois privacy protects you. You still get the emails you need, the information you need, but people can't just look up your home address on the domain registry. It's a great way to reduce spam, protect yourself from unwanted solicitations, and just people bugging you. Hover Connect is nice, too. A single one-button connect. You don't have to manage the DNS. If you're using one of the popular website companies, Squarespace or WordPress, actually, it's Blogger, it's dozens of them. You just use Hover Connect and a couple of clicks, and you're connected. So, my kids have done it. It's great. For their names, I registered their domain names when they were born. So they've got their domain names. And, as they get older, they said, hey, I want a website. I said, Hover Connect. If you're a Hover user, you're a customer, not a source of data. They are not mining you. They have reliable tracking-free email. We love Hover. Hundreds of thousands of customers use it for their domain names and their emails. For their branding, whether you're a developer, a photographer, or a small business, Hover has something for you. Expand your projects, get the visibility you want. Here's the deal. If you go to hover.com/twit, and please do so you let them know you saw it here, you'll get 10% off your first purchase of any domain name for the whole first year. Hover.com/twit. And by the way, they have hundreds of domain names. All the obvious ones, .com and .net and .org, but also .ninja, .pizza. I have a lot of kind of oddball domain names that I use for special occasions, for special usage. We have internal domain names that we use that have odd TLDs, and it's really great to have that available to you. Hover.com/twit. We thank them so much for their support. We thank you for supporting us by using that. special URL, hover.com/twit. You'll get 10% off. So there's a little something in it for you, too. So you wanted to second my emotion, Andy, on the M1 chip?
Yeah, absolutely. I've said it before that, like, as I was planning my 2-year hardware upgrade strategy, I always thought that, well, I don't know what I need. I need something like a Mac Mini for my desktop for Mac stuff. I want to maybe build like a super powerful computer for rendering and stuff. Largely because, hey, it would be fun to learn how to build a Windows PC for the first time, and also because at the time a year ago when I was making these plans, I thought that, well, the only way I can afford on like a $2,000 budget, $2,500 budget, a super level of performance, I want the most bang for my buck. So of course I'm going to go with Intel or AMD, and now that's completely out the window because not only the performance that I'm getting out of my what I call my MacBook Air Plus, my M1 MacBook Pro, but also what I've been learning in the past month and a half about exactly what the architecture of this M1 chip is and how I don't want to say easy it's going to be for them to scale up the performance of this. And now I'm excited. Like, well, why would I? If I had $2,000 or $3,000 to spend on the most powerful machine I could possibly get, why would I not get something based on Apple Silicon? So yeah, it doesn't sound dramatic to say that I'm committed to buying the exact same sort of computer I've been using since 1989, but nonetheless, but given that I thought that it was like sort of a done deal, that for the most power for the buck, I'm gonna traditionally you have to go for a Windows machine. Now I'm like, no, for the most power for the buck, I'm gonna go with a Mac.
It's just heaven. And now that more and more dev tools, I mean, my Emacs loads like that, and it's beautiful, and I just couldn't be. The webs are feels like the whole web is sped up, and I just couldn't be happy.
It was always going to be a little bit crunchy for the first few weeks, as lots of different tools have to be updated, and for the first few weeks, it was like, my goodness, emulation certainly does run quickly, doesn't it? My goodness, I'm certainly happy with how fast emulation works. With the subtext being, I really want to see how fast this thing works when it's not faking an Intel chipset.
I kind of, I kind of don't want to put any Intel, any Rosetta 2 stuff on my. So I'm looking at Activity Monitor, which now has an architecture tab, which is nice, so you can see. Yeah. And there are a handful of Intel processes here, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Most of them are background things like Vox and Sync Thing, and unfortunately, the IRC client is still Intel, but almost everything else, Apple. Yeah. And the real Apple devs, the Apple tools that we, that are Apple-ish and Mac-ish and we love, they've really quickly moved over. A lot of the command line tools now are M1 native because they always had ARM architecture capability, so it was just a question of kind of, making a few changes. I just really happy. You probably saw the thread from Stunt Pants on Twitter. She says Shaq Ron. I don't know what his real name is, but he was on the Apple chip design team. He's also worked at Googler. He's a kernel engineer. And David Cantor tweeted a couple of days ago, the things that make the M1 good have nothing to do with ARM. That cache is impressive. And Stunt Pants responded with an interesting thread. He said, the premise here is wrong. ARM64 is the Apple ISA. It was designed to enable Apple's microarchitecture plan way back when, 10 years ago. He says there's a reason Apple's first 64-bit core, Cyclone, was years ahead of everyone else. It's not just caches. It turns out Apple went to ARM and said, we need a new architecture. We need a 64-bit architecture. ARM hadn't even started doing it. When Apple began selling iPhones containing ARM 64 chips, Shaq said, ARM hadn't even finished their own core designed to license to others. ARM designed a standard that serves its clients and gets feedback from them on their ISA evolution. And in 2010, nobody really was saying, we need a 64-bit ARM core. He says Samsung and Qualcomm, who have their own architecture license, were certainly caught unaware when Apple shipped a 64-bit ARM architecture in 2013. Apple planned, he says, to go super wide with low clocks, highly OOO, I don't know what that is, optimized I don't know, highly speculative. And they needed an ISA, a system architecture, to enable that, which ARM provided. So he says, M1 performance is not so because of the ARM ISA. The ARM ISA is so because of Apple and their core performance plans a decade ago. I thought that's really
It's
really
also
interesting.
it's a double whammy, because when it first was announced, when the A7 64-bit was first announced, you could tell like the savvy industry analysts from the sort of payola analysts, because they were like, oh, 64-bit is useless. No one's going to be accessing large files on an iPhone. It's just, it was not, they needed a new ISA, and there might as well make a 64-bit, because you're not going to keep an ISA for that much longer on 32-bit anyway. And they're not a merchant silicon provider that has to keep something on the shelf and reap as much profits as they can from it. So that whole transition to the A7 was just setting Apple's architecture up. And like you said, wide and slow. It turns out that, and I don't know if the Apple actually planned this or this was a happenstance, because Apple's goal was that efficiency, but it turned out the more efficient they were, the more performant they were, and that running things wide and quote unquote slow let them put, I think the difference was described as like Intel's like a hose. They want to pump as much water through the hose as possible, but that will always be a brute force application, where Apple just opened the dam and let the river come through. And the river like doesn't have the pressure of the hose, but it is so wide. It's not flowing as fast as the hose, but it is flowing so much water that you more than make up for it in volume in this case.
Yeah, by the way, I should have known as out of order execution, not orange orangutan overalls. And it's interesting because Intel got bit by out of order execution and branch prediction. That was how Intel's big flaws ended up biting them in the butt. I guess ARM had some of those issues, like with Meltdown and Spectre, but not to the degree that Intel did. So maybe this is an advantage in a way if they can do high speculative execution and out of order execution, and not have the Meltdown Spectre flaws. That might be another big advantage over Intel we haven't even thought about.
Yeah, so. I was reading last month about the difference between the instruction decoders in Apple Silicon versus Intel, and how doubling the number of instruction decoders on this chip, plus the fact that on the AMD architecture, because every instruction is 4 bytes as opposed to they don't know how many bytes it's going to be. So the architecture also has to figure out before we chop this up into microcode, we have to figure out exactly how long this instruction is. It's removing a lot of burden off of the CPU, giving it more opportunity to simply use its processing power to just actually do calculations. Yeah. And this is the thing that really got to me, because and part of the problem is I'm very, very old school, and I'm thinking, oh well, of course, more cores, more threads. It makes sure that it can run very, very cool. And sometimes I forget about the nuts and bolts of actually what makes a CPU work. And as a lot of people who are more expert in this kind of architecture than I am started to understand the super technical white papers and dumb it down. Like Eric Engum wrote a paper on Medium. That was called Why is Apple's M1 chip so fast? That pulled together like 8 different things that I was at the time trying to digest, and that gave me my aha. Okay. Now I get, because I mean, when we were talking about shortly after when we were talking about speculation about Apple Silicon before it was formally announced, we were trying to make guesses as to, well, how long until they could actually make something like the Mac Pro, something that is a super powerhouse. And at the time, like my understanding, both from public and not public information, was that it would be very, very easy for Apple to do something like the machines that they introduced at launch, which is a very, very basic Mac Mini, a very, very simple MacBook Air, but creating that kind of a powerhouse mini workstation was going to be not necessarily an order of magnitude more difficult, but it was going to be a challenge to get to that level of performance. Now it seems, like I was saying before, it seems as though it's a problem they have to solve, but it's not something they have to invent. It's simply how many boosters can we add to the stack to make it from a rocket that puts us into Earth orbit to one that puts us into translunar orbit.
Yeah. So Rene, I think that's reasonable. You're thinking if they do announce something in the spring, it will be just a refreshed chip, as if you were putting the next the 11th generation Intel in there, except you're not. You're putting an M1. Do you think it'd be like an M1X or an M2? How long before we see those?
I think the number is tied to the silicon generation, and right now M1 is an A14. It's the A14 ISA an IP generation. So an M2 would be an A15 generation. It would have that generation of it's called IP, intellectual property is how they define the generation of the blocks on the chips as well. So it's just a weird term but it's that generation of silicon IP. But an M1X, which we've heard rumored about, could be anywhere from, right now you have 4 efficiency, 4 performance cores, which is what you'd expect to see on an A14X that would go into an iPad Pro. But the rumor is that it'll be from 8 to 16 performance cores. And up to 16 graphics cores for the M1X. Like, let's just call it an M1X because it makes sense. What Apple could call it anything they want. They could call it like M hamburger if they wanted. Yeah. But that makes a lot of sense for this chip. And then the desktop chips, which could be an M1T or an M1Z, would be like 32 to 64. And I think some rumors for a Mac Pro have been 128. And the nice thing about this architecture is that they built it to scale. They built it to scale down to the watch and up to the Mac Pro. Just right now by a little bit clock speeds because you just have a bigger thermal envelope and bigger chassis, but mostly just the number of cores that they can put in.
Yeah. And let's also not ignore that this is a system on a chip. So we're talking about not only wanting to get more performance, but also wanting to get more I/O.
Well, that was my question: is what they have to do to get more Thunderbolt ports in. More RAM. I mean, you can't.
More displays, yeah.
More displays. Those are the 3 big problems right now, right, with the existing.
Well, I think that they've daughter-boarded RAM. I believe they've not daughter-board is the wrong term. They've off-boarded the RAM on iPads, I believe, previously. That's just an architectural design, but it should have no impact. The only thing is they probably won't do DIMMs because that would probably mess with their universal
or they could make a bigger chip and put more RAM there. I don't know what the bus are.
It doesn't have to be on board either, as long as it's transferring.
But I like the universal the unified memory architecture. I like that.
And they can add more Thunderbolt controls. Like they just put 2 on this one, but there's no reason.
But that's part of the SoC, not the processor. Yeah.
The SoC, the controllers are on the SoC, and then they have, I forget the name, there's translators or something that goes to the actual ports on the chip.
It'd be interesting to see if maybe they had some unified memory architecture RAM and then some DIMMs, which would give you upgradability, but would also give you, like for 16 gigs of high speed.
So I have asked, and from the people who are no longer at Apple but used to be and worked on things like this, the solution would have to be incredibly elegant and brilliant, or it would be incredibly ugly, because you'd have to sort of either make it CPU-only memory or figure out some sort of module that would plug into the unified memory system.
Right.
And there's nothing like that now, which is not to say that that's not the kind of problem that Apple is ideally situated to solve, but it also could be like the first generation could be a little ugly hack around.
Yeah, could be a little kludgy. Yeah. So more ports are doable. What's the issue with monitors and the M1? Why is that?
It was getting the 6K support. That's just, they could only get that on one by having I believe they could have made a choice. They could have had up to 2 5K display support or 1 6K display. And because the only display they make is 6K, they opted.
But where does that come from? Is that part of the GPU? Is there a separate video?
On a traditional computers, on their older computers, it was GPU bound, either the embedded GPU or the discrete GPU.
Right.
But I think they have a separate controller block, I believe, for that now.
So that would be, again, another system on the chip thing as opposed to a chip thing.
Yeah, and I expect like the next generation, the higher end Mac Pros will have much better monitor support.
Yeah. So it sounds like all 3 things are handleable. More Thunderbolt 4 ports, more monitor support.
Well, Thunderbolt 4 is a good question. I would love to see Thunderbolt 4. They've only done Thunderbolt 3 so far.
Oh, this isn't Thunderbolt 4. I thought it was.
It's USB 4 Thunderbolt 3, not USB 4 Thunderbolt 4. And I'm iffy as to where, because they folded the Thunderbolt 3 standard into USB 4.
It's very confusing, yeah.
So it's just, and they all look the same, which is the most enervating thing imaginable.
It's so annoying. All right, so this spring, maybe we'd see an X, and I have to say, I want to replace all my Macs. I probably can't afford to do it, but I just want to replace all my Macs. I don't want to have any Intel. Get rid of all the Intel.
Yeah. This is where like my being a cheapskate. This is where it all pays off. This is where my determination say no. It's not enough that you want it. You have to prove to yourself that this is going to be enough of an upgrade in terms of what your problems that you'll no longer have to deal with or opportunities you can now pursue. And it was painful dealing with a 2012 Mac Mini as my most powerful desktop Mac for a number of years. But yeah.
And by the way, just for Rene, you make the plea, international pleas for services, please. Yeah. Every country. Let's not leave our friends to the Great White North out.
It's not like we're lucky because Rogers was a co-owner of the magazine service that Apple bought. So we have Apple News Plus, which most other countries don't. But when you look at the things that they've rolled out, like when they own everything like TV Plus and Apple Music, they rolled it out to 100 countries all at once, the same time. But when they don't, when they have to deal with all these licensing issues or banking systems, like Apple Card is still US only. Apple Cash, I believe, is still US only. Apple Pay, a lot of the Siri services, a lot of that stuff just isn't international. And international customers pay the same, if not more, in many cases for the Apple products and don't get anywhere nearly as much services support. So I think that's something they have to really focus on.
All right. We're running through this brand new show that Apple has. It's called the Apple Event Series, and or the Event Show, as Rene calls it. And we're going to get to Season 2, Episode 3 in a moment. Rene Ritchie is here. I love this as the backbone of the show is your video. You got to see it. It's at imore.com, Apple 2021. Andy Anako of WGBH in Boston. So Season 2, Episode 3, that's this summer. I think they had such success with WWDC in the virtual format this year. I would be surprised if they did. I mean, it'll be too soon to not do it. I think they've got to do virtual in 2021. Conceivably, 2022, they could do kind of a mix. I expect that's what they'll do because people do want to get together and they like the parties and all of that. But I just love the virtual conference, the virtual keynotes. I think Apple's really knocked it out of the park with that. So we'll see iOS 15.
Yeah.
Big Sur.
Yeah, iPadOS 15.
Won't be. Will Big Sur become? Will it be?
So I'm so confused about this because it didn't go to 10.16. It went to 11, but then it wasn't like 11.0.1. It was 11.1 for the update. So is it 12 this year now?
Maybe it's just going to be 12. Yeah, maybe it'll just be 12.
Because it goes from like never changing the number to changing the number real fast.
I don't know. We'll see. But there will be a new Mac OS. There'll be a new iPad OS, a new iOS, a new TV OS, and Watch OS. Do we know anything about them yet? They're not in beta yet, are they?
No, they start working on, like, I think as soon as the previous version goes out, marketing pushes down everything they want, engineering pushes up everything that they've thought of, and then Craig sits down with the other executives and goes through the giant pile on his desk to figure out what's acceptable, what's attainable in a year. And he always picks too much stuff. So
and then they have to kill stuff and
well, but it's not really like, I think some people look at it like there were all these rumors about how the iPad, the AirPods Max were missing features, but that's every product. They just don't usually get reported on. And there's been a ton of iOS features that were set up to release and didn't get finished, so they just went into the next version. Right. That's just normally what happens.
Right. And that might be June when they start talking about things like, well, an iMac Pro. I don't think a Mac Pro quite yet, but an iMac Pro perhaps. You think?
And maybe it's only the color now because like they introduced that new Mac Mini and they made it silver again because the previous Intel one was space gray and this one was not as capable.
Make it pink.
So I think silver means consumer and space gray means pro.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think
that's a thought.
But the Mac Pro is silver. See, none of this. I need a consistency back, Apple.
I did leave out iPad, and I think you thought, and I think everybody agrees, this spring will bring us a new iPad Pro. We're due for that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone wants to see it with an M1, but M1 is just an A14X with Mac specific, not just, but it is an A14X in architecture, like in terms of the cores it has, plus Mac specific IP. So, and I think a lot of people want that Thunderbolt controller on it now as well, because the iPad Pro is slower than the Apple Silicon Macs. So if you have that in there, plus a mini LED display, because Apple still doesn't like OLED at larger screen sizes. But if you have mini LED in there, I think that starts to be a really compelling upgrade.
Yeah.
All your money, Leo.
How about an SE? Will they do an SE this year? iPhone SE?
The rumors stopped. There was a lot of rumors that there would be an iPhone SE Plus, and then that there would be an all-new iPhone with an LCD screen, like an iPhone XR, but with Touch ID instead of Face ID and the power button. And then, like a couple months ago, those rumors are just like, nope.
Yeah.
It's all the reports that we're getting are that it's just not selling all that well. So that doesn't mean they'll take it off the price list, but it does mean that whatever plans they had for whatever the best case scenario was on how we can stuff even more capability into this and maintain the price point is not maybe quite so important as putting those resources into the next iPhone. The next money making iPhone, the next crazy.
Well, the SEs make money for them, although I guess the Mini is kind of an SE. Sort of.
They split the market, though, because the original SE was a lower cost and smaller sized iPhone. And now you have a lower cost iPhone that's not really that small and a small iPhone that's not really that lower cost. So however many people were combined into that one market, you now have them split between those two devices. And I think that's a huge difference.
Yeah. Let's see. Is there going to be an episode 4? season 2, episode 4 in the
that's when you have a surprise guest appearance from a character from the cinematic.
Fonzie shows up. Yeah.
From Mythic Quest or from Ted Lasso.
Yeah. Well, we know there's going to be iPhone 13. Although, will they skip 13? Yeah. How superstitious
they didn't skip
are they?
4, and that was a bad number in Asian markets.
Right. All right. Yeah, 13's fine. You say that it looks like LiDAR on everything?
Yeah, LiDAR on all they should be the same basic chassis with LiDAR on all the phones, but because the LTPO OLED panel yield rates are way up, there should finally be promotion on the iPhone, which means nerds like me will be ecstatically happy. Some, like Marquez Brownlee, will get his 120 hertz scrolling, and people like me will be able to watch 24 frame per second movies at the proper speed like Hollywood always intended.
What else?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I was just reacting. Don't worry. We're still watching it on a 6-inch screen, but at the right frame rate.
If you hold it close enough, Andy, it looks like a 65-inch screen.
I wonder if Apple will do. I mean, really, this whole post is prompted by the fact that Apple had 3 episodes fall of 2020. Will Apple do a triple header in the fall of 2021?
I think that goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning about whether they decide to show off something in the VR, AR, or automation space a little bit early. That would be a really good season finale.
Yeah.
Also, whenever they do AR, are they going to drop it as a demo, or are they going to present it as, hey, all developers, here's some, are they going to do it the way they did the M1, which is we have some hardware that we never intend to ship as a real product so that you can actually get out and start to create experiences so that when we do the real product at an unannounced later date, we will have software that consumers can actually use. It's going to be one of the most delicate product demos they've ever done, even better than the iPhone. I think it's going to be up there with the iPad, where they're going to have to do a lot of explaining and manage a lot of explanations. Manage a lot of expectations, and also make the explanation of why this is not Google Glass. Please don't think of it as Google Glass. Why this is not those eyeglasses that Amazon is selling, to make sure that it gets Amazon software as close to your brain as possible. That please open up your brain and see this as a brand new thing that we are trying to create a brand new experience with. Although it's maybe the stakes aren't quite that high. Remember, they stumbled hard on the Apple Watch. So long as they got the hardware right, they were able to spend a couple of years figuring out that, okay, it's not for opening garage doors remotely with live video. It is actually a fitness platform. Got it. Okay. Forget what we said at the launch.
Yeah, I remember that video, the garage door opening. I'm still waiting for that. I think
the process will be the same, though. I think like with the Apple Watch, they announced it in September. at that huge that huge Apple iPhone and everything demo, and nobody got one. Nobody saw it again until March the next year. But they brought developers to campus to do those kitchens where they got to try their code on actual watches, but you couldn't leave with them. You had to come in, test your apps, see if you left. Like the watch had to stay in the lab because they weren't any on the market yet.
Right.
That would probably be if they allowed apps, like if they're capable of running. My guess is they'll run extensions the way the original Apple Watch did, because I can't believe they'd have a lot of onboard resources.
Yeah, it's weird. I still can't come up with a good picture of what Apple would do with a wearable, with an AR device, because for all the reasons that we've discussed previously, it is such a hard nut to crack, starting with try to get somebody who does not wear glasses to put something on their face that doesn't really help them out unless they are wearing them on a regular basis. And that's just number one on a list of 8 improbable things they need to solve by lunchtime.
And they apparently don't work with sunglasses, which is the way that you would get other people to wear them.
Yeah.
Sunglasses.
I just don't. I don't know of display technology that would work the way that a lot of people seem to want a pair of Apple AR glasses to work. It's like, right, the technology is still either really good at putting like a notification or a graphical dingus information somewhere in your field of vision where you can see it but other people can't. It's really good at creating a narrow sort of like Periscope style AR experience, very bad at creating any kind of an immersive, what you would think of as an immersive AR experience. And again, it's a question of how Buddy Holly-ish, how Elvis Costello-ish, even dare I say Roy Orbison-ish, Apple is willing to design those glasses to hide all the technology. Yeah, exactly.
Well, according to Hollywood, I need to be able to look at somebody and see if their leather outfit would fit me since I've come back in time.
If anybody, though, could get people jumping on a new technology like that, it'd be Apple.
Yeah.
People have such faith in Apple and what they can do that's the one company I can even think of in the tech space where people would just sight unseen say, yeah, well, if Apple's doing it, it's got to be good. And will we be disappointed? It's going to be good, right? I mean, Apple won't do it unless it's something of real value. I understand. It's not.
Yeah, expectations should be set on firmly, like set phasers firmly to first gen.
Yeah, and also Apple put a lot of investment. Since we're talking about the rollout of the original Apple Watch. So many. I've never been at an Apple event where there was such like a palpable, like invisible wall between riffraff and the beautiful people, because they had so many people from like style and fashion and design that they had special air for those people that we were not allowed to breathe into, and a lot of that,
not to mention $25,000 gold watches.
That too. But what I'm getting at is that they are the company that could design something that someone is so pretty, so engaging, and so stylish, and also such a symbol of who you are and what you can afford, that a lot of people would buy this, even if all it did was put like an orange LED to say, oh, by the way, your watch needs to be recharged. A lot of people would buy it just to say, oh, look, I've got the Apple logo here. Look, can I? There are a lot of people who are like, as some people were complaining about the AirPods. Oh, well, I don't want this lollipop sticking out of my ear. There are a lot of people who are saying, could I make it larger, because I can't. I wear my hair is long and people can't see that I've got the latest Apple earphones. So.
One other technology we should mention that Apple is almost certainly going to start rolling out probably early this year is mini LED displays. Currently, they use OLED displays for their phones. They use LCDs for their computers and their iPads. Where will we see mini LED and why, Rene?
Mini LED is going to replace, my belief is that it's going to replace all the LCD displays. And what it basically does,
so they'll still use OLED on the phones.
Well, I think micro LED is going to replace the OLED on the watch first.
But micro LED is way off.
The same way OLED did. Yeah. But I think that's the why we're not going to see mini LED on those devices. Those are going to wait for micro LED, which is essentially a better version of OLED.
Right.
And these are mini LED is confusingly named. Mini LED is a better version of LCD that gives you OLED-like performance by using really, really tiny pixels and local dimming areas. It's not quite as good as OLED, but it also doesn't have just the incredible amount of problems that, that display manufacturers have to mitigate on OLED all the time.
Yeah, and of course CES, which is next week, we're going to see both micro and mini LED TVs, but they're different technology. The micro LED is an emissive display that actually can be built up in blocks. So you could have it as small as an Apple Watch, and then you can have, as Samsung did last year at CES, I don't remember how big it was, 180-inch giant
their pixels
wall.
were like 3 inches wide. That demo version.
But that's an expensive. Samsung is selling a micro LED TV if you have $160,000.
If you're a basketball player, professional basketball player, they have a TV for you.
Yeah. But so the technology is coming, and I've talked to Scott Wilkinson, our home theater guy, and he says it's probably going to be affordable in 5 years. It's not that far out. But that's a different thing. That's emissive. That is more like OLED or even CRT because you don't have a backlight. The mini LED is just a better backlight, tiny little LEDs that have, so you have more of them, so you can have local dimming better.
Right.
Local
it's like OLED only without the problems. You get the better color, better blacks, which is a big deal, brighter, but also you can drive it without worrying about burn-in, and takes up so much less power. But
power is going to be a big one because that's OLED. I have an OLED a ThinkPad Yoga, Lenovo ThinkPad. And it's the most beautiful screen I've ever seen, but the battery life is terrible as a result. So you pay for it.
And the contiguous brightness on screens that are larger than iPhones is not great yet.
Yeah. I have not seen big quality problems. I mean, after all, we have 70-inch OLED TVs.
Very different technology though. Like if you look at the technology used for television, it's mostly based on a filtering system where the phones are the pentile pixel layouts, and you get smearing at lower brightness levels. Okay. You get pulse width modulation. You get off-axis color shifting. You do get they're really good at stopping burn-in now, but they do have burn-in, and they have like the blue. The subpixel still burns out faster, so they have those weird layouts. It's not an RGB stripe, so the subpixel there's just a ream of issues with OLED. It looks fantastic though, so we use it, but it could be better.
There's a lot of reasons to go to mini LED, and again, it won't be quite as good as OLED, but it'll be better than regular LCDs. So, and we'll see those next year. You think on most of the LCD devices? Apple
I'm hoping this year. Like the rumors are solid on this year.
I'm confused about what year I'm in still. So
I know, me
2021 this year.
I still keep writing Hellscape on my checks.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know if we're out of it or not. All right. So good. All right. That was fun. Looking at all the possibilities for this year.
Can I mention one more big one that I'm hoping for, Leo, and that is the iMac. I think like the next generation iMac, if they just keep the same design, whatever, it'll still be nice and faster and quiet and all that. But if they do ship that new design that's been rumored for years, where it doesn't look like so like curved anymore, but it's ultra flat like an iPad or like a MacBook, I think that is going to put a lot more luster back in the Mac lineup.
Yeah. Cool. I think like I said, I just want to replace all my Macs. I don't know if I can afford it, but I certainly will be trying to.
Can I just say that I am so happy to have it's like watching those videos where someone is launching one of those like $30,000 like model aircraft that's like a perfect replica, and you're like. And this has been what's been like for me to watch like Apple's Mac line releases over the past like 4 or 5 years, where it's like, okay, don't crash it. Oh dear, he's got that really horrible keyboard. Like, oh, it's a really underpowered like oatmeal box instead of a really good desktop. Oh, and I'm so glad to be optimistic and to be not thinking about my escape routes from Mac, which is something I've been doing for the past 2 or 3 years. Saying, okay, let's not, if we're picking a new word processor, let's make sure we pick one that's multi-platform in case our next laptop is going to run Windows or Linux. And now I'm like, no, I'm on board. I've got the. I'm not back to the 6-color logo, but I'm back to the black logo. Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have a kind of a bunch of stories because I really wanted to kind of go through all of this with you guys because I'm excited about the future, and it is the first show of 2021. But a bunch of other things happened this week, so I'll run through them. Apple took something like 39,000 apps out of the App Store in China. This is due to a government law in China that said you have to be licensed to be an app developer. All these apps kind of had their head on the block. Because of that, Apple actually removed more than 46,000 apps in total. 39,000 of them were game apps. Out of the top 1,500 paid apps on the App Store, only 74. Wow, only 74 survived. So NBA 2K20, Assassin's Creed. Yeah, they're probably all Chinese games. Wow. Big Cull. You know, I don't know what you're going to do. Apple sent a notice out to developers saying Chinese law requires you to get, a license. And they said, we're going to kill it December 31st. This is, going to be part of the App Store review. And if you operate in China, I don't think you can flout that law. So that's what happens.
Yeah, and they've had almost an entire year to developers have had almost an entire year to keep up with this. So it's of all the reasons why we've had to report a story of Apple limiting things inside the App Store for the Chinese market, it is the least morally repugnant one perhaps we've done in a while.
Yeah, and I wouldn't expect them to do any different, I suppose,
Yeah.
Apple really has made some waves. Facebook hates it. WhatsApp is pissed with their new policy of exposing, the privacy nutrition labels and exposing, most importantly, the one that really is killing Facebook and WhatsApp is this right at the beginning when you run the app, it says wants to use the Apple ID for advertising. Do you want it to? Would you like to block it? This is a setting that's been in iOS for some time, but now it's right up front, and everybody's upset about it. Ben Thompson did a great piece on Stratechery today about the tyranny of the default. And it's one of the things he's talking about. If the default is privacy, which Apple is slowly making it, then people are going to be private. And I think that's probably a good thing. His article is about more than that, though, actually. It's worth reading if you get a chance at stratechery.com. One of the things he proposes towards the end is kind of new defaults. He runs a little video clip that's very famous of Steve Jobs many years ago talking about life and saying, at some point I realized that all the rules, most people just go through life going, well, these are the rules. You have a family, you make a little money, you just, you go through life. He said, at some point I realized all the rules in life are made up by people that are no smarter than me, by which, by the way, in his head, he's thinking are dumber than me. And I can make up my own rules. And that's what Steve did, by the way.
To be fair, these are the sort of proclamations you can make when you already have a buttload of money.
Yeah, so. And he's like 25, so, right. It's easy to think that when you're young. But it is a good point that, we kind of just the status quo always wins. And so he does propose some new kind of status quo defaults, including free speech. More information is better than less information, and the solution to misinformation is to improve our ability to tell the difference, not trying to suppress speech. The second one is the default that the status quo, it should be the default that the status quo is a bad thing. This is going to be against human nature. This is going to be tough. Instead of justifying why something should be done, the burden of proof should rest on those who believe things should remain the same. And it should be, and this is a third one, these will be fairly controversial, I think. It should be the default to move fast and value experimentation over perfection.
Yeah, see,
what happens to Ben to me, when Gruber's not on the podcast yelling at him at the same time?
Yeah, that's problematic. That's a problem because I understand the sentiment. I like the basic sentiment, but that's the sort of position that the technology industry hasn't earned yet. Right. Because we don't have the representation amongst the core of engineers so that when something is being developed, how a technology is going to affect everybody is there's an engineer there who's going to say, no, I know that a lot of people are you're absolutely right. It is a big pain in the butt that you have an address book where contact information keeps going out of date. And I suppose on a whiteboard, it would be wonderful if I could simply have an app that would just go look for all public sources to automatically go out and find out why this number is out of order and what the correct number for this contact is. But speaking as a woman in a city, there's a reason why I don't update. I don't give out my phone number to other people. So I do appreciate the idea that if people should have a reason to stop something from happening, but nonetheless, we have seen a lot of problems caused by the fact that a lot of engineering is being done
and break things.
Yeah, well, the people who are moving fast and breaking things are wealthy white male developers who are solving problems that are affecting them in the San Francisco Bay Area, and not even like wealthy black men and wealthy black women who are living in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Right.
So this is, again, good things. It's
called privilege. It's a position of privilege. And it's hard when you're in a position of privilege to understand what it's like to be normal.
There was a really good thread on Twitter the other day from Stephen Deal. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he was like, the difference with Facebook is that Google could fix its content moderation and stop its military contracts, and it would still be Google. And Apple could fix its supply chain and, fix its pricing, fix its sourcing, it would still be Apple. Amazon could treat its workers better. It could stop self-dealing. It would still be Amazon. Netflix could stop making Tiger King. It would still be Netflix. But if Facebook stops what makes but if Facebook stops what makes it egregious, it stops being Facebook.
That's right.
Because their business model is based on it. On promoting and feeding us the worst parts of ourselves.
Here in Forbes, there was a great article. I think the title is WhatsApp Soundly Beaten by Apple's Stunning New iMessage app. It's Zach Doffman. But the really interesting thing is the graphic in here comparing the privacy label for iMessage to the privacy label for WhatsApp. And I have to think that consumers, when faced with this, might say, I'm not sure I want to give up all of that stuff. And WhatsApp says very clearly they share it with Facebook. They collect all this information and they share it with Facebook. So I think which
they said they wouldn't when they were bought.
Right. Well, notice the founders are gone, long gone. Jan Koum collected his $30 billion and moved on.
But like in Brazil and in many countries, WhatsApp is just the default, and the same way WeChat is in China, and they're not going to look at iMessage no matter what.
You have to use it. Yeah. Let's see. We were talking about updates, but there is an odd thing happening with Google apps on iOS. Google's been updating them on Android, but they haven't updated their apps on iOS in some time. Fast Company's speculating perhaps they don't want to be subject to the privacy labels. If you update your app after December 8th of last year, and Google hasn't, you have to start publishing that privacy information. Do you think that's what's going on, or is that a conspiracy theory?
They can't hold off forever.
Eventually, they're going to have to do it. Yeah.
It's probably timing, and it's probably messaging. That would be my guess. Either they're working on saying, well, maybe it'd be better if we just simply make all of our apps web apps from now on, so we don't have to deal with any rules.
Yeah.
But to me, that's always been the big difference between Google and Facebook, is that I can't think of a Facebook offers me nothing that would make me ever tap that box, where Google offers a whole bunch of really useful services, like their photo app. I don't use it, but I can see why somebody would want to use it. I use YouTube, I use Gmail, and I could see why somebody would want to use those things. Facebook is not giving me, Google is doing what I want them to do, and that is, give us your data and we will give you this. We will make it worth it for you because of this. And they're able to make that argument. And for a lot of people, they win that argument. And I feel like Facebook doesn't even try. They just think they're entitled to our data and don't have to give us anything in return for it.
Yeah.
Also, they're being cute about it. Facebook is
full-page ads in the New York Times and the Washington Post.
Yeah, that infuriates.
And Kara Swisher
save
loot boxes.
small business. Save small business. Yeah.
No one's fighting for you, American small business, but we have picked up a red banner of revolution. Like, oh wait, no, we don't. We're not communists.
Jousting at Zuckerberg's.
There is a small business that little David that beat the Apple Goliath, Corellium. They make software that help people find bugs in iOS. And the way they do it is they run a iOS emulator that you can use on Windows or Linux so that you can kind of bang on stuff. Apple said, no, that violates our copyright. The judge in the case ruled that Corellium's creation of virtual iPhones was not a copyright violation, in part because it was designed to help improve security for all iPhone users. Corellium, the judge says, isn't creating a competing product. It's a research tool for a small number of consumers. Apple hasn't said whether they're going to appeal. They worry, at least they said in the lawsuit, that Corellium's products could be used by bad guys to try to find ways to hack iPhones. They say Corellium doesn't, care who buys their product, which Corellium denied, and the judge agreed.
I think they have to appeal. Like, I think a lot of the copyright stuff, people get angry at Apple for a lot of copyright stuff. But my understanding of the law is that you have to defend, even if you lose, you want to lose based on a court decision, not because you didn't prosecute it, because part of having a copyright is proving that you've been prosecuting it.
Right.
Is that trademark law?
It is true in trademark. I don't know if it's true in copyright.
I think that's the Disney clause, why Disney is so vigilant about their Mickey Mouse. And I think that, I don't know if Apple necessarily wanted or needed to win this. I think it's them prosecuting them and losing it is probably the best solution for everybody in this particular case.
And as usual, the bigger the company gets, I think the more important it is that we're not satisfied with them simply saying you can't do this because we say so. They have to say you can't do this because actually you brought it in front of a judge and an outside person with no particular interest in Apple's success or failure or whims or particulars decided that it was okay for us to enforce this. So they have to the more that they're forced to debate these things in court, the more that argument is going to be part of the discussion whenever they think about creating a new policy. Say, well, what if we get sued about this? What if the developers don't go for this? What if the EU decides that we are basically self-dealing by making this a pre-installed app? Should we open this up a little bit further? So the more control, the more people sue. I think not the trolls, but the more actual interested parties can sue about this, the better it is for everybody.
The judge didn't dismiss the case entirely because he said, while the copyright part doesn't hold, he said the DMCA does prevent circumvention of security measures, and it's possible that Corellium does violate that. So he asked for both sides to submit a status report by January 11th, and he will decide at that time how the case proceeds. So there is still a part of that case continuing. I just wanted everybody to know I'm using amphetamine right now. And I love it.
Which version, Laporte?
I'm using amphetamines right now too. I didn't know.
I used to use caffeine, but
Chuck,
now
are you dealing with Chuck? Oh,
no,
I'm sorry.
I use amphetamine. So caffeine was a long-standing app that would keep your Mac from sleeping, as caffeine does. But I actually kind of enjoyed it when a developer, William Gustafson, said, well, I can make something that's even better than caffeine for keeping your Mac awake, and I'll call it amphetamine. He's been selling it on the App Store for 6 years, but he got a notice December 29th threatening to remove the app because it was named after an illegal drug. The guideline at issue is 1.4.3, stating apps that encourage consumption of tobacco or vape products, illegal drugs, or excessive amounts of alcohol are not permitted on the App Store. I don't think the name, or by the way, the icon, which is a little amphetamine pill, is encouraging the use of drugs, but I kind of understand.
It was incompatible with the baked app, wasn't it? It was causing some sort of weird interaction.
Oh, incompatible with the baked app. Oh, yeah.
I'm just kidding.
If you're baked, you're right. No, that's a good point. I should have another app for my iPad to bring it for my Mac so I can bring it down after using Amphetamine.
I hope all the people who work at Apple who have ADHD and take medication for
That's
it
right.
are able to set them straight on the fact that we take amphetamines twice a day, and it's actually very, very good
That's
for
what
us.
Adderall is. Yep.
Next question, please.
3 different flavors of amphetamine salt. Gustafson tweeted, just got off a call with Apple. Appeal accepted. Amphetamine will remain on the App Store. Thank you all for your comments, opinions, and action. We may not all agree, but I'm happy we have the freedom to express ourselves today. So Apple has...
The appeal process seems to be working this week.
Yeah, this is the new appeal process.
It seems to be working. Yeah.
And by the way, I love amphetamine, and if I'm using it now because when I go to sleep, the chat room turns off and stuff. So while I'm using my Mac on the show,
talking about the app anymore. Can't even tell if he's talking about the app.
I know.
It also means, but seriously, it also becomes a really big problem because amphetamine, it's sort of like if BB Edit said, well, we don't know, you're not explaining what BB stands for, and it could stand for something naughty, so we're going to force you to change the name of your app. But, well, this is what people know our
like
app
BB
by.
gun,
we
right?
are an institution.
Right. It's a big deal.
So
So
amphetamine, if it was forced to change the name of its app, it's on a level it would have to start off at ground zero again. So.
Yeah. And by the way, amphetamine is free, but you can buy Gustafson a cup of coffee.
Yes.
Apparently, he's not against caffeine. 6 years that's been around, which is pretty funny. It's got a lot of nice switches and settings. And by the way, I think it's Apple. Yes, it's M1 compatible. So.
It's amazing how many of the apps that we really, really rely on are the ones that simply allow us to tell this operating system, this hardware, please stop trying to help me. Just do exactly don't do that thing that I don't want you to do that you keep thinking you're helping me by doing automatically. And that's one of those apps.
You're not my computational parent.
Yes. New member of the Apple Board of Directors, Monica Lozano. She's the president and CEO of College Futures Foundation. A longtime editor and publisher of La Opinión, the largest Spanish-language newspaper in the U.S. It's great to have a Latinx board member. She's on the board of B of A and Target as well. And I think this is a good diversity move for Apple. And frankly, more than diversity, she's really accomplished and interesting person.
She's a good get.
She's a good get. That's the way. Former board member at Disney.
No longer doing affirmative action for rich old white guys who are getting unfairly zero competition for board seats.
Those rich white guys, they don't need it. It's okay.
Well, there was no competition. They didn't have to earn their seats. They just got them because they were rich white guys. Right. Now they actually have to face off against competition.
What do you have against that? What a year 2021 was for app stores. Both Google's App Store and Google Play soared to record-setting heights. Consumers spent $111 billion globally on in-app purchases, subscriptions, and premium apps across both marketplaces. But it was really Apple that made the lion's share of the money on this graph. The blue is Apple, the black is Google. And so you see Apple had both had roughly 30% growth. But since Apple started at $55.5 billion, 30% is $72.3 billion in 2020. This is according to Sensor Tower.
That's why everyone wants to make an app store all of a sudden.
Yeah. So there's some good money. Some good money in the apps.
You don't have to worry about chamfer angles either. It's just electrons, and there's as many electrons out there as you can pick up and put in your basket.
I'm actually really interested because both Fortnite and Google and Microsoft have all decided that they can put their streaming gaming services on iOS just by doing it in the browser. That's
how much money Apple's giving up by doing that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, but it's encouraged. Well, I think Apple. For one thing, Apple can't turn that off because then they really would get antitrust.
No, I mean, like if they had just had acceptable streaming policies, they could be making a small percentage off that as well.
But I'm actually encouraged by this capability. In fact, I've been kind of playing with WebAssembly because I'm sure that's what they're doing. And it really is amazing what you can do in the browser now because of the support for WebAssembly. It's very
and I'm
powerful.
guessing we're going to see WebMetal so that existing
Wouldn't that be
Apple
cool?
ecosystem apps would work really well on iOS browsers.
Wouldn't that be cool?
You wonder how Apple would react if there were a coalition of app developers that are in let's say, product lines that Apple distinctly does not approve of, and they decided to create a very, very friendly and safe front end to installing these web apps and for discovery of these web apps. And suddenly, it's not as though these apps were cutting into App Store downloads, but they were enough of a presence to really move the needle. And suddenly you have people who are on the subway using the kind of apps on the iPhone that Apple does not want the Apple logo to be associated with.
Yes.
Like porn apps, like games that are really, really super explicit. You wonder if Apple, if in the worst case scenario, isn't creating a problem that in the next few years they would much rather not be part of. I was joking before about how Google taking all of their Google apps, their Google Office apps and stuff like that, and making that into web apps that they never have to have any sort of a review process for ever. But nonetheless, if Facebook decided to do that, if all the social media companies decided to do that, if Google decided to do that, Apple might. I thought you were
going to make an Outlook joke right then.
Oh, I'm about to talk about Outlook, actually. That's an interesting segue.
There's going to be a brilliant joke and you stepped on it, but that's fine.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let's back it up.
No.
My fault. My bad. I'm sorry.
Joking. I had no joke planned.
Oh, okay. Then we put them on the spot.
It was probably going to be pretty bad anyway.
We're going to talk about this tomorrow on Windows Weekly, but Microsoft has a new version of Outlook they call codenamed Monarch, Project Monarch, and it's their one Outlook vision. They want to make a single Outlook client across the web, PC, and Mac. This is actually a problem right now because Outlook can mean a lot of different things depending on which Outlook you're talking about.
The power of software.
The project will deliver Outlook as a single product with the same user experience and code base on Windows or Mac. Smaller footprint, accessible to all users, whether they're free Outlook consumers or commercial business customers. This is from Windows Central. Zach Bowden, who is a very good,
really good.
Yeah, really good reporter. He says, I'm told the app will feature native OS integrations with support for things like offline storage, share targets, notifications, and more. It's one of Microsoft's goals to make the new Monarch client feel as native to the OS as possible while remaining universal. It's not tomorrow. It's probably going to be at the end of 2021. And it won't replace the Mail app and the Calendar app on Windows 10 until next year. So that means probably not until next year for the Macintosh either. But I think that's something Microsoft needed to do. And absolutely. I hate Outlook. But if they can reinvent it and make it useful, the premise of it is great. It's email, calendar, address book all in one.
But isn't it so weird that we're seeing this? Like, I always thought that Android was a really un-Google-like product and that they should have brought WebOS and made WebOS the future of their
I agree.
Their native platforms, because it was such a Google-like web-forward, thinking-forward product. Yeah. And Microsoft was the opposite. Like, they are the native platform builder, and now they're doing web apps before, like what Andy was saying, before Google is doing them.
Yeah, I wonder if it'll be PWA, a progressive web app, or something else.
It sounds like. Because it's not. It sounds like it's not Electron, which thank goodness.
Thank goodness. But again, that goes along with this whole WebAssembly thing. I think we're really getting to a time where the technologies on the web are so powerful now available that there really is no reason an app has to be, at what we think of as a standalone.
If you don't need
blob.
cutting edge perf. Like back then, like it took me 20 seconds to open a calendar app on my WebOS phone. I loved it, but it was 20 seconds to open a calendar app.
Right.
And that's no longer the case for a calendar app.
No. But WebAssembly is fast. WebAssembly is very fast.
Yeah. Also, given the idea that if you're going to be getting your email, you kind of are required to have a connection to the internet anyway. It really is the ideal sort of fodder for a web app.
Yeah.
I do use Outlook as my mail host, And I initially thought that, well, I'll just probably just be using like a mail.app with it because it is an Exchange server and it's a standard that can be supported by third-party apps. But I just found myself liking the web interface so much that I actually had to after a few months I had to remind myself that, oh, but Andy, you're not downloading anything from the server ever. I had to write a script for my server at home to make sure that it always like downloads the IMAP file, downloads the Exchange mail, so I have a local copy of it.
Yeah, otherwise it just caches it. It's not a permanent storage.
If something were to happen, if something were to happen, that would be bad. This is the sort of stuff I really, really want to see. Having one of my main machines is still a Chromebook, and one of the first things I had to unlearn about it is that yes, it can run. You can install native Android apps and run apps locally, but that's not the ideal way to run this. And I'm constantly surprised by how much I can get done just through what is just simply a Chrome browser window. And it makes you start to think about how much overhead are you kind of giving up by having different little code modules for every different app bundles for every single thing that you need. How many problems you're creating by always having to keep these different apps up to date. There could be a time when the rest of the world kind of catches up to Chromebook to Chrome OS in the sense that a lot of different developers will realize that, well, why are we trying to deploy an entire AAA game to every single platform that has to support it? Why don't we just put it up on a stream and just do a really good streaming client that could access it from the server? On and on and on again, because I would not have guessed that Stadia would work as well as it does, but for at least for someone who is not an intense gamer such as myself, someone who maybe has $60 to spend on a good racing game every now and then, but who can't bring himself to spend $500 and to throw enough elbows at Walmart to get a top generation game console, it is a damn good solution. So don't fall behind by being stuck on desktops, apps on the desktop anymore.
I also think it's kind of a harbinger of the future of computing, which I keep talking about, but I really feel like streaming, server-based computing is kind of the future in general. I mean, if you could play, Cyberpunk 2077 at a decent frame rate off of Google's servers on any low and slow device, that running an operating system is the least of it. Amazon has added Mac Minis, Intel Mac Minis, but some of the Mac-focused cloud companies are adding M1 Mac Minis now, I think.
Yeah.
Is it Mac Stadium?
Mac Stadium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's very interesting too. How long before you just don't buy a Mac? You just buy a thin client.
Mm.
No, us, Leo, we drive manual cars here, sir.
No, I have that. I can't remember what they call it, but the new Raspberry Pi that's all in one. It's an all-in-one keyboard, kind of like a Commodore 64.
Yeah.
And it went from something that I had to buy because I'm like with Raspberry Pis what Rene is with watch bands. If it exists, I have to own it. And it's gone from something that I wanted to have for the library to it is now like in the living room on a table as a very, very full-featured, full-throated computer that I actually do real work on when I don't necessarily want to have to pull my laptop out from wherever it is before. There's the bare minimum is in computing right now can do amazing magical things now, and that's what people. I think it's going to change a lot of people's minds once they realize that maybe the minimum buy-in for a computer is no longer $1,000, even $500. It's $200. It's $250, or it's whatever you pick up from the side of the road at the night before
especially
trash day.
If there's something heavy duty you need to do and you can just stream it.
Right.
You could play Cyberpunk 2077 on that Raspberry Pi.
Again.
So that's where I really think that it'll probably be a hybrid thing. I'm not saying it's going to replace the idea of one desktop, one CPU, but I think in a lot of circumstances, certainly in businesses, you don't need to have a CPU on every employee's desktop. That's crazy.
I mean, client Scott McNeely is going to be so happy.
Who?
Scott McNeely.
Oh yeah, he said it. The network is the computer.
Yeah. I mean, bring things full circle. I was talking earlier about how a year or two ago I was thinking if I have to spend $2,000 or $3,000 on the most powerful desktop in my office, the value proposition is going to be Windows. Now it's actually flipped the other way, where I kind of still need to have Windows in here again because of the work that I do. I have to make sure that I can run
me too.
run capable software. Now it's more like, gee, I wonder how much of a Windows desktop I can make for $500.
Right.
Knowing now that even for $500, even if it won't be a gaming desktop, but it will still be a very, very capable, and it'll be a modern budget PC as opposed to a 3 or 4 generations old piece of thing that was obsolete by the time I actually put the first layer of thermal paste with my thermal paste applicator.
Right. Well,
sorry, I was watching that Verge video last night. Sorry.
For most people, I mean, this year Microsoft's going to start offering Windows Virtual Desktop. It's one of the reasons I'm not too worried about the loss of Boot Camp on a M1 Mac, because if you could stream Windows, that for most people, I don't want to own Windows. Maybe there's sometimes I want to use some Windows stuff. Streaming, it's fine with me.
You install software over a network. Most of your files are for a lot of people, your files are in the cloud. Your media is in the cloud.
Yeah.
Now your games are in the cloud. Yeah. It's again, so long as something has like a really good efficient 1 gigabyte Ethernet port, let alone 10 gigabytes, you're good. Yeah. As long as it can render graphics really fast, you're good.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's all the news that's fit to fit this show. So this would be a good time to get ready for our picks of the week. Who should I start with this week? Let's start with you, Rene Ritchie, your pick of the week. I'm intrigued.
So I've got 2. First one is that mutual friend, often guest on the show, Georgia Dow, has finally launched her YouTube channel.
Well, it's about time, Georgia.
I know. I don't know why she was lollygagging. But it's a channel where she's going to do psychotherapy tips and tricks.
Nice. Did you help her set the camera up and everything? It really looks
beautiful.
Good.
Yeah.
I did. Her and her family helped as well. So we worked on it as a community project with me just, giving my advice here and there. But
yeah.
Yes. Although she made a lot of decisions, her and her husband made a lot of decisions about the lighting and things that were very different than what I suggested, and I think way smarter. And she's also much better on camera than I am. So I'm anticipating she will get to 1 million subscribers way before I do. Not even just a little bit before I do, but way before I do.
Live a better life. Georgia Dow now has her own channel on YouTube. Once she gets to 1,000 subscribers, that's when she can have her own custom URL. Is that
100
right?
subscribers for a custom name and a month.
Okay, so she's got more than 100.
Well.
She's got 764 subscribers. Yes. But I suspect she's going to. The month isn't up yet, but I think we'll give you the special URL. But just for now, just search for Georgia Dow on YouTube. Psychology, Technology, Life, and I see there's also the Apple Talk podcast there as well.
We try. Yeah, we try.
Nice. What's your other pick?
And the other thing is I've been collecting SD cards and I didn't have a good place to store them. So I got this from Polar Pro, and it's just a very handy. I wanted something very nice, like, that was sturdy, that would hold cards.
Yeah, I like the brass.
And so this has both SD cards and what is important to me is CF Express cards, which you can get the big old CF Express cards. You can get CF Express Type B cards, which Canon uses, and CF Express Type A cards, which Sony uses, because why should anybody use the same type of CF cards? That would be silly. That would be ridiculous. So this case, you can put the SD cards underneath and then the CF Express Type B cards on top of them. And so I can hold 4 of each card. They have other kinds too. They have just SD cards and they have other sizes.
You can get up to 24 cards in the SD card edition. That might be the one I end up getting. Yeah, I really like that.
And it looks good.
It looks really pretty. Yeah. I use a soft case right now. I think I need this.
That's what I had too, and I was just nervous.
PolarProFilters.com.
They also make good filters.
Yeah. Well, they're kind of known for that. This is cool.
Yeah. They have a little partnership with Peter McKinnon or somebody. I don't know.
Andy Yanako, pick of the week.
I am so embarrassed that last week, our last one before January 1st, I forgot to plug the comicbookfonts.com annual.
Oh, they do that every year.
I've
bought so many fonts because of you.
January 1st. And I feel bad about it because it's they do these professional display fonts and handwritten letter fonts.
So nice.
They're still worth recommending. But the reason why I was kicking myself because I usually remember to recommend them on January 1st because they dropped the price of all of their fonts to 1 penny per year since the year of Christ's birth. So every font was $20.21, including the ones that were $140, including the ones that cost like $15. It's all $20. So I to sort of make it up for you, I'm going to recommend an even better deal on fonts. It's a site called Font Squirrel, fontsquirrel.com. There are a lot of different, if you do a Google search for free fonts, you're going to find a wretched hive of scum and villainy behind almost every link because they just get fonts from places and put them up there, and then whether they're legal or not. Font Squirrel does a really, really good job of making sure that the fonts that are inside this library are at the very least free for commercial use. So if you want to do a sign, if you want to do a t-shirt, if you want to do a logo, if you want to just print up a letter or whatever, that's perfectly fine. You can download those fonts and use them free of charge. Many of them are also free for use on the web. Many of them are also free for use on ebooks. But at the very, very least, when you're in a position where you're trying to create an invitation to like a Harry Potter themed party, and you wish you had this sort of spooky sort of display, like alchemy sort of display font, and you're saying, well, maybe if I just take Helvetica and I stretch it this way and I add some spatter to it, and it's going to look out lame, but you can go to fontsquirrel.com, look at all their categories for display fonts, headings, bold. It's hand-drawn fonts. It's retro novelty fonts. They're all really nicely categorized, and then you might find there you go.
I want this one, Special Elite. It looks like a old ribbons kind of failing typewriter.
Yep.
I love that.
Yep. You can get the things like if you want the Star Wars font, you just gotta you can't fake it. You just gotta find the Star Wars font. Man. And Distant Galaxy, which is free on Font Squirrel, not quite as good as what you get on comic book fonts because they do a lot of that stuff where they will. It's sort of like the fake fragrance where they say it kind of sounds like what it's the commercial variant, but it's just fake enough to make you understand what's going on. But it's still very, very, very good. So it's a really good resource. You definitely want to bookmark that and have it in your menu because honestly, there are very few things that separate like the people. There are people in the office, men in the office who like wear clip-on ties, and then there are people who know how to actually tie a necktie. And I think that fonts are kind of like the same sort of thing where they're the people where, again, content matters. The actual words matter. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but I'm saying that there are people who like they're using Helvetica, they're using Myriad, they're using like the stuff that came built in like with their operating system. But then there are the people that actually found that big heavy marker brush stroke one, so that when they put that thing on the sign on the fridge in the break room that says there's a reason why I put my labels on my sandwiches, so that you have no excuse for stealing my sandwiches. Stop stealing my sandwiches. That you take that seriously. That person actually, that was malice aforethought. He actually came out and chose the right threatening font to put on that. He didn't just use Helvetica. You better be prepared for a mouthful of X-Lax if you steal this person's because he is the thinking of a Romulan.
That papyrus skit from Saturday Night Live. It's a papyrus skit all over again, Andy.
Oh, I love these. I just like looking at fonts. This is a great place just to go and look at fonts.
Have you guys seen especially that papyrus on Saturday Night Live?
Excuse me?
No, I don't remember that. I'll have to look for it.
It's Ryan, what's his name? Ryan Gosling, and he sees that they use papyrus for the Avatar poster, and he can't understand why a human being would do that to another one, and it destroys his life in like a 5-minute skit.
No, I'm the same way. When I see people who have like tattoos like across their chest, and I don't think that, oh, you're ruining your life, or oh, why did you put something like that across your chest? I'm like, why are you using an all caps display font why are you using a black letter font in all caps? You're not supposed to use all caps in a black letter display font. And I'm saying, oh, well, actually, that person got that in prison. He probably wasn't thinking about that. And also, you probably should keep your mouth shut about his choices in typography, Andy.
My pick of the week is solving a massive problem that we have all been subjected to. If you've ever been on a Zoom call with somebody who decides to type, it goes goes right into the microphone.
Are you angry with your keyboard, sir?
Believe it or not, there is a new app called Unclack that is designed to mute your mic automatically when you're typing and then unmute it when you stop. So if you've got that person in your life who just can't help themselves, they have to type, you need Unclack.
Is
this for like
somebody a link to
Syracuse
this
on a podcast?
I don't know. You have it start at login. You can customize it. Even have a 6-color menu bar icon. It's, that's pretty much it. It's not, it just does the job. It just does the job. Unclack.
This is sending someone a link to this is like offering someone a breath mint. Like you're supposed to say the message is really clear. You're supposed to accept it and accept like they gave you an open door to solve this problem with dignity. If you don't accept this, if you don't go through the door we've marked for you, we're going to push you through the most embarrassing door possible.
Macintosh only. Got to give it to the Windows guys too. I'm sure there's something. Unclack, UNCLACK .app, and it's
I want to send AJ Kauterman like some. So I hope he does a Kickstarter or something for a companion app for the people who have the boom mic that's pointed right at one of their nostrils, so you can just hear them. I'm sorry.
And by the way,
you've made me so happy to know that that someone said, God dang it, I've had it with this. I'm going to write a piece of free software so I never have to deal with that again.
And it even has a switch, so if you want to type really loudly while you're talking on Zoom, you can pause it so that you get a chance to express yourself. Unclack. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this thrilling edition of Mac Break Weekly. Again, next week, David Pogue will join us. There should be a lot of fun. I kind of like it. It's just the three of us sometimes, it gives us more time to talk and all of that too. I like it. You'll find Rene Ritchie on YouTube, youtube.com/Rene Ritchie. He also writes for iMore and others. And what does his hat say? It says something, the North.
The true, yeah.
We the North. Oh, that's you.
We the North. That's right.
Yes.
That's the Toronto Raptors, I believe, in the sports ball, in the basket sports ball.
Toronto Raptors. We the North. Which is interestingly grammatically bizarre, but it's not incorrect.
Think different, Leo.
Yeah. Think differently. There should be a we comma the North, I think would fix that. We comma.
But it would look ugly in the logo.
Thank you for being here, Rene. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks to Andy Yanako. When are you going to be on GBH next?
Hopefully we're going to be back to Fridays at 1 p.m. as usual. So that's Friday at 1 p.m. this week. Go to WGBHnews.org to listen to it live or to stream it later about 3 hours afterward.
Nice. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Rene. Thank you all for joining us. We do Mac Break Weekly every Tuesday morning, 11 a.m. Pacific. That's 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1800 UTC. As with everything we do, we have a live audio and video stream that you can tune into. If it's just the behind-the-scenes making of stream. I know it looks kind of like the show, with some exceptions. That's at twit.tv/live. Mostly the exception is it's not a TV channel, so it's not exactly at 11 a.m. There's stuff we got to get ready and do things and stuff like that. But if you want to do that, twit.tv/live. And if you are doing that, you should probably be in the chat room too, because they're watching live. irc.twit.tv. It is time for our Twit audience survey. We do this every year as a way to. We don't want to spy on you. We don't have the ability to spy on you. So once a year, we like to ask you some basic questions, get a little bit of an idea, get to know you a little bit better, so that when advertisers say, well, do you have any men listening? We can say, yes, as a matter of fact, that kind of thing. And people are always very helpful doing this, and we really appreciate it. This year, the survey is at twit.tv/survey21 for the 2021 survey. It's not a lot of questions. If you don't want to answer a question, you don't have to. Sometimes I get people saying, well, you don't give me 3 choices for operating systems and I want 3. Don't worry about it. It's not that, just do what you can. Answer the questions you can as best you can, but it is very helpful to us, so we appreciate it. twit.tv/survey21. Of course, this show and all of our shows are podcasts. That means they're available on demand, audio and video. And there are a couple of places you can go to get it. Of course, the website, everything's there, twit.tv/MBW for Mac Break Weekly. But there's also a YouTube channel. You can, some people like YouTube. I don't know why, but they do. You can subscribe there. And then you'll, ring the bell, tamp the thing, and then do the doohickey, and you'll get notifications, I guess, or something. A real subscription awaits you at any podcast client by subscribing there, and it's free. You'll get an automatic download of the audio or the video, your choice, so that you have it whenever you're in the mood to listen to Mac Break Weekly. I said last year that I would replace this pathetic show close, but I had never thought about it much. So what if I just say, that's it for Mac Break Weekly. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. How about that? That works.